الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Praise be to Allah, indeed He is worthy of all praises, He is worthy of the praise. Indeed it is He to whom we turn to seek refuge from the evil of our own actions, and it is He to whom we turn to seek forgiveness, seek solace. Indeed, it is He who sent down His beloved slave and messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with the true deen, and it is He who will make this deen prevail over all other systems. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send His blessings and peace upon His beloved slave and messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his companions and his family. The most important part of the Jummah, which is the exhortation, O you who believe, O you who claim to believe, have taqwa of Allah as is His right, and do not die except in a state of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those. Ameen. قال الله تعالى كما ورد في سورة البقرة بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذ قلتم يا موسى لن نصبر على طعام واحد فادع لنا ربك يخرج لنا مما تنبت الأرض من بقلها وقثائها وفومها وعدسها وبصلها قال أتستبدلون الذي هو أدنى بالذي هو خير اهبطوا مصرا فإن لكم ما سألتم وضربت عليهم الذلة والمسكنة وباعوا بغضب من الله ذلك بأنهم كانوا يكفرون بآيات الله ويقتلون نبينا بغير الحق ذلك بما عصوا وكانوا يعتدون صدق الله العظيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي امري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم ارنا حق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وارنا باطلا باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه امين يا رب العالمين. I believe we are very much familiar with the contents of this ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is recalling and recounting to us what the Bani Israel did after they were given the freedom from Pharaoh, from Pharaoh, and they were receiving manna and salwa as their sustenance, as the rest from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and yet they go to Musa alayhi salam and they ask for what? The translation. And remember when you said, Ya Musa, indeed we cannot be patient or endure only one kind of food. Remember, this is two kinds of food, manna wa salwa. But when you have ingratitude, more will appear less. And less will appear even so. Pray then to that sustainer that he brings forth for us what he grows from the earth. Its herbs, its cucumbers, its garlic, its lentils, its onions. Musa said, would you take a lesser thing in exchange for what is so much better? Then go back in shame to Egypt and exchange, and then you can have what you're asking for. And so Zillah and Maskana was heaped upon them. And this because they persisted in denying the truth of Allah's messages and in slaying the prophets. And this because they rebelled against Allah in transgressing the bounds of what is right. Now, interestingly enough, we all seem to think that this was just about lentils, cucumbers, onions, and so forth. What is interesting is the fact that the Egyptologists have recently said these things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is recounting in this ayah, this food was considered to be the food of the elite of the Egyptians during that time. And these foods are preserved in their scrolls that date back to the time of Pharaoh, in their recipes and so forth. And what this is basically alluding to is the fact that even though the Bani Israel had become physically free, they were still aspiring to a standard of their former masters, which they had been programmed to believe as the gold standard. Very important lesson for us because we will bring it to the present day. So even though they were getting manna and salwa, their conditioning during their captivity had made them look up to these foods as the sign of having arrived. This is what we will aspire to. And when they had Musa alayhi salam in freedom, they did what? They went and did the same thing. Not that they were grateful, but they wanted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to conform to their standards of success, which Allah will never do. Important lesson. But that if we bring it forward today for us, we find amongst us, me first, and then around us, we find that we are falling prey to the same thing. We want the same things that have been set as standards of success by those around us. And it is an important problem that we face. And we face this problem because we are basically now living in a situation where we feel questions, but we are afraid to ask. And because we are afraid to ask, we don't voice them. And because we don't voice them, we don't go to actively search for answers and constructing an answer or an alternate. And as such, we live a schizophrenic life where Qala Allahu, Qala Rasul is all hunky-dory within the confines of the masjid. Or we should pray like this, hold our hands here or not here, or like this. We may do Rafa'adain. The wudu has to be perfect. It's good, it is. But that is what our focus has become, because we do not want to tackle the greater questions out there. The questions that impact our reality, the questions that color our thinking, the questions that set us in different directions that we are set in, and are definitely going to impact on our kids, because we are afraid to ask them. How did this come about, this state of affairs for the Muslims? And let me take 1 minute to briefly and simplistically put it there. The turning point was the Europeans' arrival in America. Before this time, the civilization's economic and military power was balanced, proportionate to the produce of their land. What you produced, you ate, you sold, you had economies that were limited by that. Gold, whatever, was limited by that. The empires would fight each other, would increase their land, and thus their revenue bases, or shrink in economies, and it was more or less in balance. Europeans come to America, they get a cheap source of gold, silver, whatever, what have you, at the expense of annihilation and genocide of the local native population at the time. They bring that gold back. And where do they bring that gold back to? Back to Muslim lands. Because the Muslims were the dominant industrial economic power of the time. They bring that gold back, and they do what? They buy your raw resources. They take those raw resources because the Muslim merchant would prefer 3 gold dinars to 1 gold dinar that a Muslim local purchaser might be able to pay him. And fine, in short term it makes perfect business sense. There's no conspiracy over here, by the way. It goes back. The local Muslim business is dried up because he can't get the raw resources, or if he can't get the raw resources, the price is jacked up because he has to make his own profit too. Result being, the local economy dries up. Quite a period of 100, 150 years. The European now brings back the finished goods back to the Muslim land. There are no finished goods available in the Muslim lands for that price. The Muslims, with the gold, buy those goods back, and that gold is retransferred back to Europe. In effect, what I'm driving at is that over the last 400 to 500 years, Muslims have been absent in the arena of making global policies, economic. We have become subject to the economic policies that are made out there without our input, and we are reduced to issuing fatwa based on translations. Riba. When was the last time we Muslims really got together and sat down and looked at this question of riba. What is riba? We are not talking about translations. What is riba? How was riba defined in the time of the Prophet ﷺ? What did it entail? What impact did it have on the society at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares war on those who indulge in riba? What are the parallels, if we bring it forth today, for our economic systems that impacts our lives daily? What are the parallels? Is riba interest? Very easy to say, well, riba is interest, translation. Interest is riba, riba is haram. Khalas. What is the role of interest in the economical system today? What was the role of riba in the economic system at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, his companions, and the successive generations? What is the role of inflation? What is the role of a monetary value? What is the role of a monetary vehicle today? Is the dollar bill today the same as the dinar of yesterday? These are important questions to ask because it impacts us. It impacts me, it is going to impact my kids. It is going to impact your kids. With each successive generation, educating your children is going to be more and more difficult. I know of people who would rather not go to college because they have to take out the student loans, and because interest is riba and riba is haram, I don't want to do it. What are you going to do? Are you going to produce a generation of Muslims who are unsophisticated, uneducated, powerless to impact on the global scenes? Or are you going to subject that child and to a schizophrenic personality, Qala Allahu Ta'ala wa Rasul in the mosque, and everything else, the different reality outside? And if you think I'm kidding, you've got another thought coming. Go around and ask and see. And I'm not saying riba is halal. By no means. I'm citing this as an example. As an example of the task that is facing us. We are faced with. I was having this conversation with a very well-known speaker, an Islamic scholar. And we were having this conversation, and he said this, he had an observation to make. And he said, Doc, I'll tell you what. These are valid questions, but we are afraid to ask them because of the fact of the gravity of what is described in the Quran. That if you indulge in riba, Allah is going to wage war on you, is declaring war on you. Because of that fear, we are limiting ourselves. But that warning does not prevent from you looking at it and formulating answers. And if interest, for example, is riba, then your responsibility, my responsibility does not stop there. We have to come up with an alternative. Because this is a reality that is impacting daily on us, our children, and the world around us. And it is our responsibility then to come up with an answer. And you will not be able to answer unless you go through these processes. And he said, goes on to say, it's the same situation, Doc, that we talk about birr al-walidain, but we don't talk about the oppression of the parents. Because we are afraid to talk about that. As Muslims, it is our responsibility to face up to this. We cannot have a Middle Eastern Islam, for example, where at a recent Islamic conference in Dubai, the last speaker, the one who closes giving the last speech, spends 40 minutes praising the prince, the generosity of the prince, the generosity of the shuyukh, the way they have arranged the conference, and so on and so forth. Well, does this scholar not realize? My question to you, and I'm not meaning to beat up on it, but I mean to bring these questions up so that we think about them and change our reality for us and those around us. Does this scholar not realize that the money that the prince is spending on this conference is coming from revenues from Emirates, an airline that serves alcohol with halal food? Does this scholar not realize that the money that this prince is spending on this conference is also coming from the alcohol revenues from the brothels and the bars that are running in Dubai? Does this scholar not realize that there are also scores of non-Emirati who are living in worse than slave conditions in his realm, who cannot find a decent place to sleep or aspire to a minimum lifestyle that his fellow Muslim Emirati is taking on and is giving this speech? The same person goes on, makes a point. I don't know what is wrong with us, but we have seemed to separated Islam from the ethical foundations that it was. I go to Makkah. One of the worst cities with the worst homosexuality problems, Makkah al-Mukarramah. This is not me saying it. This is a prominent Islamic scholar who is telling me this. That I go for salah in a masjid at the bottom of the Hira, and I'm walking to the masjid. I see garbage outside the mosque. I see destitute children begging outside the mosque, and I go in the masjid and I'm listening to this Imam give a khutbah of the do's and don'ts of Islam in terms of what is bid'ah and what is not. And that is the extent of his Islam. And I'm sitting there thinking, there's Hira, there's the garbage, there is the destitute child. What of them? And what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the earliest ayahs in the Quran says? بَعْدَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. And she will be asked, for what crime was she killed? Is he asking about what was bid'ah and what was not? What was the laundry list and what was not? My dear brothers and sisters, these are serious questions that we have to answer. The question of the day when a child goes into the university is there God? You don't prepare your child from day one to handle that, then be prepared to see a continuation of the exodus of the children, our children, from Islam. May Allah protect us and our progeny from there.
Amen.
The good news. The same scholar says that the Muslims in America think a different way than the rest. And as such, they have a greater responsibility to come up with answers. And they have the potential. Tells me, now, I've seen people, Muslim kids, growing up agnostic, growing up atheists. Something happens to them. They come to the Quran, they click, and I can tell you, dog, these kids are powerhouses. Our responsibility as community is to utilize them. The number one question for us right now, imperative is, like I said in the last khutbah, we have to be moral powerhouses. Number two, we have to be economic powerhouses. Wealth creation for Muslims, halal manner, has to be one of the top two priorities for the Muslims in America. And there is nothing wrong with that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Jumu'ah, فإذا أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. After this, and the prayer is ended, go forth and look for the fadl of Allah. Surah Al-Qasas, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وابتغي فيما أتاك الله الدار الآخرة ولا تنسى نصيبك من الدنيا وأحسن كما أحسن الله إليك ولا تبغي الفساد في الأرض إن الله لا يحب المفسدين. Seek instead by means of what God has given you the good of the life to come. Wealth creation. I'll close with this incident. I want you to think about it. Ghazwa Tabuk. The Prophet ﷺ is doing a fundraising. This is the same Tabuk in that fundraiser that the famous incident happens with Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Brings whatever he has and places in front of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ asks, what did you leave behind, Abu Bakr? Abu Bakr says, your love and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ smiles. This is the same scenario when Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu decides that he is going to take lead over Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he divides his belongings in half. Half he leaves home, half he takes to the Prophet, thinking that he would have exceeded what Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu brought. And then on hearing Abu Bakr Siddiq's answer, he says, nobody can surpass Abu Bakr. What is he referring to? He is referring to the quality of Sayyidina Abu Bakr. He is not referring to the quantity that is being brought. 2. Same Tabuk, Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu brings multiple camel loads of goods and places it in front of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ is happy. He continues with the fundraising. Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu gets up, goes, brings up another multiple camel loads and places in front of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ is happy. He continues with the fundraising. Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu gets up, goes a third time and brings and showers it on top of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ says what? From this day on, no matter what Usman does, he is not going to be held accountable for it. Put it in context. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu is bringing half, leaving half. And he is saying that nobody can surpass Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who has brought very meager belongings in quantitative terms. Yet, the Prophet ﷺ does not give this bashara to Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He does not give this bashara to Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, but he gives this bashara to Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Now, I want you to conduct a thought experiment. Ask yourself these questions. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu left something behind. Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu brought multiple camel loads of goods and placed it in front of the Prophet ﷺ. If the Prophet ﷺ had stopped his fundraising at that point, would Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu have given the other two, or would he have retained them? One step forward, the Prophet ﷺ continues with the fundraising. He gets up, goes and brings another train of camels and gives to the Prophet ﷺ. Question, if Prophet ﷺ had stopped the fundraising at that time, would Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu have gotten up and got another train of camels? The Prophet ﷺ continues. He gets up and he gets his final cash. Point I'm driving at. Number one, the Prophet ﷺ is in Medina. We have this romanticized version of if we were to get the Prophet, we would always stick with him. Well, nobody loves the Prophet more than the Sahaba. Okay? The Prophet ﷺ is in Medina. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu has material. Well, how did he get it? Did he just pray for it? Or did he go out and spend time away from the Prophet ﷺ and get it? How did Abdul Rahman ibn Auf radiallahu ta'ala anhu get his wealth? He's one of the Ashra Mubashra. Comes penniless to Medina. Later, when he comes to the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ is amazed and says, wow, where did he get all this money? How did he do? Oh, I was successful in business. He spent time away from the Prophet ﷺ. Does not mean that they were doing haram. It means that they were understanding their times and their needs. At this point in time, it's a further kifaya on the Muslims, in my opinion, to acquire wealth, to acquire economic muscle. Because it is not the politics that drives the international relations and the international oppression of the Muslims. It's the economy. As they say in the American political dictum, it's the economy, stupid. You think if you and I were economically powerful enough and coupled with that moral strength that we had talked about previously, we would not be able to sway the policies of this government and those around? It is imperative on us to understand our times and for our children to understand and to use it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Anfal says what? بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأعدوا لهم ما استطعتم من قوة ومن رباط الخيل ترهبون به عدو الله وعدوكم وآخرين من دونهم لا تعلمونهم الله يعلمهم وما تنفقوا من شيء في سبيل الله يوفى إليكم وأنتم لا تظلمون صدق الله العظيم. Make ready for them, against them, whatever force you have to deter them. We are not talking about overpowering, deterrence. Ask yourself this question. Is it more easy to oppress a millionaire or easier to oppress a poor person? By the way, this whole issue of this world being like the wing of a fly, yes, maybe so, definitely so. But that does not give us license or permission to ignore that wing of the fly, because on that wing of that fly is the road for our salvation and our good akhirah. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم? And what is that تجارة? تؤمنون بالله ورسوله تجاهدون في سبيل الله تجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالكم. No mal. The first equation is already gone. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Muslims are supposed to be mujahids, not rahibs. There is a difference between the two. A rahib doesn't have anything to give. A mujahid gives by choice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what we're supposed to be. Mujahids, not rahibs. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Now end this ayah from Surah Al-Salah. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما أرسلناك إلا كافة للناس بشيرا ونذيرا ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون صدق الله العظيم. And we have not sent you, O Muhammad, by extension, we have not sent you, O Muslims, but as a universal messengers to the men, giving them glad tidings and warning them against sin. But most men understand not. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not make us of the people who have no understanding. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of the people who have understanding of His deen, of His dunya. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those who are truly muwahhids. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those who bring prosperity and blessings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on ourselves and on those and people around us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us, our progeny, our generations safe in Islam and make us vehicles of bringing others into the blessing of Islam.